Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for another one of our Crucible Virtual Artist Talks. My name is Alyssa Stone. I'm the Director of Programs at the Crucible, and I'm so grateful that you are joining us today for our fourth Virtual Artist Talk, today featuring the incredible glass art of Sam Schumacher. We're going to welcome Sam in just a moment, but before we get to that, just a couple reminders about how we like to do our virtual artist talks here in the Crucible. Drop us a line and say hello and where you're watching from in the chat box. We are going to keep all of our viewers on mute today. That will help with everybody's sound, but if you would like to leave us a comment or start to ask questions of our artist, Sam, please drop them in the chat box and I'll go ahead and ask your questions towards the end of our talk today. This is our fourth virtual artist talks. We do these on Fridays at 3 o'clock. We are so glad that you're joining us. Say hello in the chat box, drop us a question, and definitely stick around all the way to the end of today's talk where Sam will be doing a live glass blowing demo from his home studio, which is so exciting. And we're really excited to get to see that today. I assume you all know about the Crucible, but just in case you don't, we are a nonprofit 501c3 arts organization based in West Oakland, California. Since 1999, the Crucible has been an important cultural arts organization and community in the Bay Area. We serve more than 5,000 students a year, work with over 45 local schools offering classes, workshops, and site visits, and have the pleasure of introducing so many students to the transformative power and confidence-building experience of making art. Over 20,000 people each year interact with our classes and programs, with 64% of the young people we serve receiving financial aid to participate. For many, the Crucible is the industrial arts school in the Bay Area, known for high-quality teaching and a vibrant artists community. However, since COVID-19 erupted in our area, the Crucible has had to cancel or postpone over 230 classes and programs. We are working to bring some of the magic of the Crucible online to you, including this virtual artist talk today. We are going to get through this, but we are asking our community to support us by becoming a member, purchasing a gift certificate, donating to the Crucible, or buying art directly from our faculty. We currently have a match campaign where up to $50,000 in donations are being matched now through May 8th. If you can contribute, we appreciate it, and every dollar is doubled now through May 8th, up to $50,000. You can learn more and help support the Crucible by visiting thecrucible.org. All right, throughout the talk, remember you can send your questions over to the chat box and I will ask them towards the end. Give us a shout and tell us where you're watching from today. I always love to see where people are viewing us from. Towards the end of our discussion, again, we're going to see a live studio demo of Sam blowing glass. You won't want to miss it. And now I am so excited to welcome Sam Schumacher, glass blowing artist extraordinaire. Please join me in a warm virtual welcome to Sam.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sam, I'm going to give the audience just a little bit of background about you before we jump into some questions. Glass blowing instructor Sam Schumacher had his first experience with glass blowing in 2009 and was immediately hooked. Sam began teaching courses at the Crucible in 2015, shortly after co-founding a glass blowing co-op with other Bay Area artists in Berkeley and starting his own production company, Rocket Glassworks. Sam's work often explores the connection between the natural and built environment using organic forms to craft modern, functional pieces. Sam has helped create a number of pieces for our annual Fire and Light Soiree and Art Auction, helping to raise $5,000 for the Crucible's education programs. Whoa, Sam, that is so much.
Yeah, it's an honor.
I would love to jump in and learn, how did you first get involved in glass blowing?
All right. Well, I started in college. I was studying communications of all things, and I basically had some elective credits to fill my senior year, and was able to take classes at the Museum of Fine Arts School and Massachusetts College of Art in Boston through a consortium with my school. And I figured, why not take glassmaking and glass blowing? And so I did, and I was immediately hooked.
You grew up in a family of makers and creators. Tell us about how your parents started you on a path of entrepreneurship and making.
Yeah, my dad's always been a tinkerer. He's just always been working on projects and had a home workshop. So from a young age, I just I grew up in a culture where it was just, oh, if you want something, you make it. Like, he built the play structure in our backyard that I grew up playing on, and he was always just working on a different project. And so yeah, that was definitely inspiring, and still is. And my parents are also both kind of serial entrepreneurs. They've opened and run 5 different restaurants over their lives. My mom runs an animal hospital now. And so it was, not only just that sort of that culture of like making things, but just that you can go out and find your own path in the world. You don't have to go work for somebody else. And so, yeah, I ended up just finding a passion of my own and then turning it into a career.
And we're so glad that you found your way to glass blowing. What is your favorite thing about working with glass?
There are a lot of things. The material itself is, I guess, seductive is the best way to put it. It's like this 2,000 degree, just like amorphous ball of goo that can turn. It's really easy to manipulate in a lot of ways once you sort of get over the hurdles of working with it. And it's very pliable. You can stretch it. And it also sets up really quickly. So there's kind of this like instant gratification that you get with it that has always been really appealing. It takes like, some people say it takes like 10 years and 10 minutes to make a cup, because you have to build up the skills for 10 years, but then, really just like making something, it all happens pretty quickly. And that's really gratifying for me. I found with other processes, I would get sort of impatient and frustrated. And with glass blowing, it's just this, it's just really fun. Instant.
How do you bring your artistry into the functional work that you make? Can things that are functional still be art?
Yeah, I, like some people, spend a lot of time thinking about this for some reason. But yeah, I think that there's definitely something about a handmade object that just really has a lot of personality and really sets it apart from something that's just mass produced and machine made. And it's, I think that, when you bring a handmade object into your house or your life, like it really can improve your space. And, and interacting with these objects really sort of, it gives you like a relationship with the maker that you don't get from something that's mass produced. And that's really appealing to me. And especially these days when we're all so socially isolated, it's like I get to have a connection with the people that are out there using my work. And that's really gratifying. And just knowing that, even in a small way, if people are out there using my objects and appreciating them, and that hopefully it's bringing a bit of beauty into their world in what might otherwise seem like somewhat dark times. So yeah, it's just little things like that.
I love that. And I absolutely feel when I am picking up an artist's work and I know who they are and I've seen them work and I know this piece that they've made, I can feel them in the piece. Do you find that when you're working, you are putting a piece of yourself into your art?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially with glass, it's like often literally blood and sweat that goes into it. I mean, I cut and burn myself on a regular basis to make this stuff, and so in that sense, it's like quite physical. That it's like, but yeah, I mean, it's something that you have to be very driven to do, just to even like have the whole setup of like the furnaces and running it all. And so you really like invest a lot of your time and effort. And I mean, my whole life is basically dedicated to making these objects now. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a part of me in all of this work in a way. And it's funny, there will be things that I made like 10 years ago that I, won't remember making them, or I won't really, it happened so long ago, but it's just like, I can recognize it instantly still. And be like, oh, wait, I made that. Like, I know that has to be mine. And, that there's something really, really fun about that too. And like walking into people's houses and seeing my work in there is always really fun and exciting. And yeah.
Glassblowing is also a uniquely communal art form. You're working by yourself a lot, but often you're working with a team. A lot of glass pieces need multiple people to help create them. Can you talk about the importance of community in the glass world?
Yeah, for sure. It's especially relevant right now when we're all so far apart. But yeah, glassblowing is a team sport pretty much. So you always need to have, well, not quite always, but for the most part, you want to have a team of people to be able to make things, especially more complicated pieces and like stemware and sculpture with multiple parts. You often need to have someone who's just turning the pipe and reheating, and then someone who is applying other little bits of glass, and then someone else who's torching or manipulating it. And so sometimes we'll have a team of 5 or 6 people making big work, but at the very least, like my standard production, it happens with like 1 or 2 other people. And so I'm used to just having a lot of people around in the studio, and just and of course they become family because you just are working with them and eating with them and hanging out with them all the time. And so it's been a little bizarre around here lately. It's been really quiet, and except for the trains. My studio is right on the train track, so those are still going by. But for the most part now, it's just me, and I'm somewhat limited in what I can be making right now because of that. But yeah, so I'm making more simple pieces, and yeah, I think that about covers the the community side. I mean, oh well, I guess also in terms of this, like the basic mechanics of running a studio, we usually have a group of people who are coming by and turning up the furnace or turning it down, and we are communicating with one another to always make sure we're on top of things. I mean, it's a whole process of just cooking the glass in the first place before you can even start doing it. And so we often take turns doing all that work, and so it's been interesting, just doing it all by myself. And yeah, so it's a little bizarre, but I am grateful to be able to be in the studio and be working right now. It's helping keep me sane.
It is a really beautiful choreography to watch glass blowers work together, and even some of the technical logistical aspects of it have a flow, and it's really stunning to watch if you've ever watched glass blowing, which I'm sure many of our viewers have, and you'll get to towards the end today when Sam gives us a live demo in his studio. Talking a little bit about the broad impact of glass blowing. Glass blowing has generally been a very popular area at the Crucible, and the Netflix competition show Blown Away about glass blowing definitely gave us a little bump. What are your thoughts about bringing glass blowing to the mainstream TV audience? What was it like for you to watch a show about the thing you do daily?
Well, I definitely, I must admit, I was rolling my eyes a little bit when I first heard about it. But then I actually watched it, and I was actually pretty impressed with how the show was done. And in some ways, I think it's pretty cool because it's giving a lot of people perspective on what I do, and it sort of gives them like a door into the glassblowing world, which is kind of historically always been very shut off to the public. And so I think it's cool in a lot of ways. I think hopefully people through the show have come to gain a greater understanding of what goes into making a hand-blown piece of glass. And I think the show actually did a really good job of explaining just the basic mechanics of it and really laying out that foundation of just how it works. I also found it pretty endearing that, it was kind of more of that like Great British Baking Show mentality where like everyone's really sweet to each other and helping out. And it's like, oh, you don't have this tool? Oh, here, you can borrow mine. And, and I think that's really indicative of like the glass culture in general. People are really supportive of one another. I mean, going back to the whole teamwork thing, but just even, other artists who don't necessarily work together, it is like a really supportive community and a tight-knit community, especially, and it's not a very big community. So we know, for the most part, we all know each other, especially everyone in the Bay Area pretty much knows each other. And so I thought the show actually did a pretty good job of just portraying that ethos in the glassblowing world.
I love that. I only want to watch like positive, happy competition shows where people are raising each other up. That's my kind of competition. We've been talking a little bit about your work. Let's take a look at an example of your work. You have a series of glass-blown skull cups. How did this series come about, and could you walk us through this process?
Yeah, so I was originally inspired again by my folks who, with one of their restaurants, my mom was tired of all the cooks wearing like really grungy, ripped up t-shirts. So they decided that they needed to make some t-shirts, some uniforms for their cooks. And when they were on a trip in Mexico, in more than one sense, they took acid and went to these temples in a thunderstorm and were sketching these skulls. So this was a temple where a lot of human sacrifices were done, and they were engraved with these skulls just lining all of this stonework. And so they had made all these little sketches of these skulls and then translated it onto these t-shirts that like our whole family has, and like all of my close friends have now gotten shirts. And so anyway, I was inspired by these drawings and decided to translate it into glass. And so as you just saw, I did that. And I wanted to figure out a way that I could mass produce them to a certain extent. They're still like hand finished, but I wanted to just be able to get that impression relatively quickly without having to hand sculpt each one. So I went to the Crucible and started talking to people about making molds, blow molds for glass. And Kier Lugo, the head of the glass shop, really helped me talk it through and figure it out. And then a couple other people in the foundry who I talked to about it. And going back to what I was saying earlier, I tend to be a little impatient with processes that have a lot of steps. So I was basically just trying to figure out a way to shortcut the mold making process as much as I could, because I'm a glass blower, not a metal maker. So yeah, I basically, after talking to a bunch of people, figured out a way to just make a ceramic positive of the skull that I sculpted and then bisque fired. And then I basically took that ceramic skull and heated it up, and I put a steel cylinder around it, and then I just poured molten aluminum on top of it, and I cut that in half on a horizontal bandsaw and hinged it and made a mold, and here it is. So you can see it was cast into it, just a steel cylinder, and then on the inside You can see the detail of the skull there. Hopefully it's showing up for you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, so yeah, so it's hinged here, and then it has these handles for an assistant. So again, the team sport thing. Typically you'll have an assistant who's kneeling down on the ground, and they'll have it open like this, and then the other person will drop a glass bubble off of a pipe inside of this, and then the assistant will close it up, and then the person with the pipe blows like crazy to fill the mold. You blow really hard to get and fill all these little impressions here, and then the assistant pops it open, and you pull it out, and then it's all hand finished from that point. So basically it looks like this, where you have kind of this hole at the top where it's attached to the pipe. We'll take it, transfer it onto another rod, and then heat up the lip and flare that open so that it has a nice open top to drink out of.
That is so cool, and thank you for walking us through that really neat process. What is it like to blow glass? Like, what does it feel like to be in your element? Does something wash over you when you're doing it?
I think another big part of the appeal for me is that I sort of enter this like flow state where it kind of really forces you to just have complete focus on what you're doing, because you're trying to balance this like molten, gooey, like wobbly ball of glass on the end of a 4-foot stick, and if you aren't paying attention for 1 minute and you're like checking your phone, then it's gonna like literally just fall off the end of the pipe onto the floor. So, or you'll stick it to the door of the furnace or something. And so it just really requires extreme focus, like all day. And so it's like kind of like going into a trance. It's like I show up in the studio, light up the furnace, and then once we start working, it's like we'll take a break for lunch in the middle of the day, but otherwise, both me and the assistants we're just like doing this dance kind of, and it just entering this flow state where really, sometimes we'll have a little bit of banter if we're doing stuff that doesn't require a lot of attention, but really it just requires extreme focus. And so sometimes I'll just like open my eyes at the end of the day. I'll be like, oh, okay, I guess the day's done. And I don't know, there's something appealing in that. I was saying earlier, like I started studying communications and I did go into the communications field, but I like physically couldn't just stare at a screen all day. And so, just being able to like have something that takes all my focus all day is really gratifying.
You began teaching at the Crucible in 2015. And have been a big supporter, creating both art and centerpieces for our big gala, the Fire and Light Soiree and art auction. How has working and teaching in our studio influenced your art and your practice?
Yeah, the Crucible is just a super inspiring place to be, whether or not you're working on something. I showed up with this project and talked to people I knew for the skull mold, and was just able to get all my questions answered right there by people who knew all these processes, or or at least knew somebody who knew about it and could say, oh, go talk to Nick in the foundry, or Rosa in ceramics, or whoever. It's like I think that's part of why the Crucible was built in the first place, right? It's to like foster this cross-departmental collaboration. And so it's super inspiring, even if you're just there to go hang out and watch other people work, and then you can, sort of translate that into your own work. And, I think, I'm also missing the community a lot these days too, because everyone just loves each other around there and is really friendly, and it's just a great place to be. But I guess, I think that about sums it up.
We miss having everyone at the Crucible too. It's a little piece of our hearts, and it definitely is tough not being able to be around there and see everyone and get to work together. Um, Back to some of our fun Crucible work. What is your favorite thing about teaching glass blowing?
Yeah, it's just got to be the look on people's faces when they stand in front of that furnace for the first time, because when we open the door, it's over 2,000 degrees in that furnace. So you just get blasted with this this big blast of heat, and so it's always intimidating at first for pretty much everybody. And but you often find that by the end of a class, people have overcome that intimidation and the fear that they felt by handling this 2,000-degree material, and not only come away with an appreciation for the process and how it works and learning a new skill, but it's just conquering that fear. I think is it's really valuable for some people, and to be able to facilitate that and see it happen over and over again when people come into the studio for the first time is really gratifying. And also having the opportunity at the Crucible to teach more advanced classes. I proposed a class last year, a goblet making class. Since I've been making a lot of stemware, I figured I would help try to spread some of the knowledge I've learned. And so the class ran for the first time, and it was really exciting to see people who are also working on just furthering their technique, and kind of more intermediate people, to really have those rungs on the ladder to be able to climb up and develop their careers.
As a teacher, you are also always sharing how these different techniques have changed over time. Have there been large innovative changes in how glass is blown?
So that's also one of my other favorite things. I guess I have a lot of favorite things about glass, but the basic mechanics of glass blowing haven't changed in about 2,000 years. If you looked at an ancient Roman blowing glass, they would have a setup that was pretty recognizable, compared to my setup out there. I mean, the big ones are the fuel sources that we use. We're now using electricity and natural gas mostly, and some vegetable oil, recycled vegetable oil, and things like that. Whereas way back when, they were literally just burning whatever they could get their hands on. I mean, it was wood and coal and oil, and so they decimated whole forests to cut down to fuel glass furnaces. So in that regard, we've come a long way, and in terms of the insulating materials that we use to line the furnaces and all that sort of stuff, that technology has come a long way. But yeah, the basic techniques of working with the glass haven't changed in a really long time. So it's this really cool way, and there are a lot of places like the Corning Museum in New York, and the Tacoma Museum of Glass that are posting all these historical glass objects all the time. And it's really fun to see that and to think that, that is really made the same way that I'm making my work now, even though it's 1,000 years old. So yeah, it's this connection to history is really appealing.
Yeah, it makes it so special, to know that the way that glass can be created in an artisanal way is the same way as 2,000 years ago. It's a really special way to stay connected to the craft. We are going to jump to another incredible set of Sam's work. And as we make a little transition to his work with palette, which we'll learn about in a second, I just want to remind all of our folks listening that if you've got questions you would like me to read for Sam, go ahead and pop them into the chat box and I'll read them towards the end of our discussion. Sam, we want to take a moment and show our viewers some of your work you made specifically for Palette, a high-end dining restaurant in San Francisco. How did you first get involved with Palette?
Funny story. I got an email sort of out of the blue asking if I could possibly make a jumbo-sized wine bottle that could be cut open and stuffed with a whole raw chicken and vegetables, and then sealed back up and used as a prop in a photo shoot for a cookbook. And I was pretty flabbergasted, I guess, at first. I was like, this is really bizarre. But, you know, it sounded like fun. So I said, sure, let's do it. So yeah, I ended up working with the owner, the founder, and chef of Palette, Peter Hemsley, on that project a few years ago now. And so yeah, we made I think a dozen of these jumbo wine bottles, cut them all open, stuffed them with chickens, and then glued the bottoms back on so that they just looked whole. And then here, one of them is right here in fact. So this is the bottle. It's cut open here, and here's the little bottom of it. So we stuffed them and then got this back on, glued it up, and kind of edited that out in Photoshop. And yeah, did this really wacky series. And it, you know, basically led into him, you know, telling me that he was starting to open a restaurant and working on that, and that he wanted to, you know, kind of change the experience a bit with the tableware. I mean, it's a pretty innovative concept. It's not just your standard restaurant. It's really has integrated art into the food and just the whole experience. So like everything is handmade, all the tableware, everything. And so yeah, it turned into this huge project that's been the bulk of my work for the last 2 years. And so I guess it was kind of a lesson in not turning down any job, because you never know what it's going to turn into. So I've definitely taken that to heart. And yeah, it's just turned into quite an experience. You saw in the slides there. It was an art installation I did at the restaurant space that is a series of hanging wall vessels that have plants growing in them. And yeah, so but then beyond that, yeah, just did all of this tableware. I mean, and we're actually still producing work for the restaurant. They're still planning on opening up back after all this madness, and they're doing some really cool like takeout and pantry stocking stuff right now. So yeah, we're still working on it, but to this point, we're going on about 2,000 pieces of hand-blown glass for the restaurant. So, and that's all the stemware, drinking cups, plates, serving bowls. Yeah, it's wild.
That is extraordinary. 2,000 pieces. Amongst that huge number, do you have a favorite piece from your work with Palette? And could you walk us through what the technique and steps were to create it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like picking a favorite one of my children. Not that I have children, but I guess that's probably what it would feel like. But man, there's a lot. The oyster platter is probably, I guess I'd have to pick it as my favorite. I was just really happy with how they came out, and the process itself is really fun and exciting. And you know, it was just sort of a surprise of like, okay, yeah, and we had just like one of our design meetings, and we're talking through the process, and it's like, all right, so we really want to connect the dish that the oysters are being served on to, you know, the food itself. Like, how do we do this? And so it's like, okay, let's like literally connect it with like a pile of oyster shells and dumping like glass over it, and you know, really capturing that texture. And I was just like super surprised with how it came out, and like each little flute around the edges of the platters, you know, came from like an individual shell, but it really like emulates the fluting around the edges of like the real shell. So it was really exciting. Oh, I see someone's asking to see the oyster platter. Here's a little one I have here. So you can see like each one of these little depressions here like was an individual shell being pressed in to the plate there. And then it really captured a lot of the kind of rough organic texture of the shells. So yeah, I was really excited with how that translated.
It's a little meta to have an oyster platter made by oysters to serve oysters looking like an oyster, and I love that. So
Yeah.
please always keep making those.
Yeah.
Um, the work that you did with palette was the first time you made such a significant number of stemmed glassware that was in a set. Can you talk about some of the challenges of that project?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we first started talking about it, I mean, the first set of glasses that I made was, it was 400 pieces of the same design. And so I had never made that many of any single object before. So it was a little intimidating at first, but I just started doing it. Yeah, so it was kind of funny because we would do, like, the way we work is we do a set of prototypes. I mean, we'll have a design meeting, we'll talk about what we're gonna make and kind of the general parameters. Then I'll do, you know, a week or so or however long of prototyping, come up with a set of prototypes, and then we'll have another meeting, look through them all, critique them, and then ideally just pick the one that's there or make another set until we're happy. You know, but then when you're making this many of one thing, it's like, it was definitely a challenge to have them all look like they went together, even though they're supposed to be handmade and organic and, you know, relatively like free form. You know, they're not mold blown objects. They're freehand sculpted. But it was, so yeah, so it was really funny. Like I always found that, like, the first couple days of doing production, once we like had our prototype, you know, they would all come out pretty good, but like a little wonky. And then by like the third or fourth day of making the same piece, it's like, okay, we're really getting into the groove. You know, like my assistants and I were like not even talking anymore because we know we're just, you know, in this flow state, kind of like doing this dance. And you know, but then like once we really get going, it's like they start coming out like better and better and better. And so by the end, it's like, if you looked at like the first 100 I made and then the last 100 I made, it's like they totally don't quite match up. And maybe I shouldn't be saying this if my clients listening in, but yeah, I always found that to be pretty funny. But yeah, just like really gratifying too, to be able to like physically see the progression of the work.
To help close out our small chat about palette, we have a special video actually to show of the process of making the oyster platter. So we're going to show that real quick so people can see. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was very pleasantly surprising the first time we tried it. And it's like, oh, wow, that works. Like, let's keep working on it. And so, yeah, that was, and yeah, like you said, it's like kind of meta and like kind of silly too. It's like, oh, we're making an oyster platter. Like, let's smush some oyster shells on the glass and like see how that goes. But it was really gratifying to have such a cool result.
I love that. So as we start to get towards the close of our talk, before we ask some of our audience questions and get to see your incredible demo, I'd love to talk a little bit about how art is helping you cope and how it is not. Now that we are in week 6 of the shelter in place, could you tell us about your creative process? How has creating in quarantine been for you?
Yeah, it's been full of challenges, you know, like I described earlier, you know, just not having my people here with me has been tough, just sort of emotionally and also in terms of like making the work. But yeah, so I spent like the first 4 weeks at home just sort of like getting grounded and like catching up on things and like gardening and making sourdough bread like everyone else. And so that was really good. But then, I just had to light the furnace back up. I have a little bit of work, so I'm just trying to get that made. And it was enough work that I can make by myself, that I'm able to do it. But it's been interesting being back in the studio. It's definitely been helpful to have some sense of normalcy in these crazy times. But yeah, it's also just been a little strange just by myself all day, and and like sometimes being here like late at night gets a little spooky. But yeah, it's been good to be making, and I decided to try to find a way to kind of keep in business through all this stuff. So I've come up with I'm calling it a quarantine collection, because it's all work that I can make by myself. And it's just sort of based on things that after spending a lot of time at home, just sort of like started making things for the house. Like I needed a new bowl to be able to like rise my sourdough bread in. So I like came up with a design for like the right proportions of a bowl for rising your bread. So it's going to be able to like rise up, but not go too flat. And, then like other like fruit bowls and things like that for like, just kind of little things to make the house feel a little more cheery. But yeah, so it's just, it's been good, but it's definitely strange times we're living in. So, every day is different, and just sort of trying to put one foot in front of the other and keep going, because at this point I don't know what else to do.
It definitely is a strange time, and it feels like every day is a different thing. A week feels like a month nowadays. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are feeling the same. And I just want to say, if anyone needs a sourdough taste tester, I will be more than willing. Like, just putting that out there. So Sam, if you need a taste tester, let me know.
All right.
So this is one of my favorite questions to ask, because I think it's really interesting to see what people think or have to say about this. Might you have any suggestions for artists who are out there feeling stuck or distracted in their practice?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the biggest thing that I've been trying to tell myself and would say to other people is just to like, I don't know, just be nice to yourself. Just like, don't take it, like these are trying times, and like no one is going to be functioning at full capacity right now. And like, that's okay. We'll get through it, and things will eventually feel normal again, I hope. But, until then, it's it's okay to like feel all the feelings and just, not be productive if you're not feeling like being productive. But another thing that I've found helpful is just like, in the time that I was just home before I came back into the studio, I was just trying to like find other hobbies to do that were not related to like my normal practice. And that was really helpful. So I just like started gardening like crazy, and like making sourdough, and like, tinkering with like clay and just things that I wouldn't normally do. But it sort of helped me like get out of the funk when I was feeling funky. So yeah, I would encourage people to just like try something new if you're feeling up to it. If you're not feeling up to it, that's totally fine too. It's just like, we just got to do what feels right, and not be too hard on yourselves.
Hear, hear, and thank you for that. I am really excited to start diving into some of our listeners' questions. I'm going to try to get through as many as possible in the next few minutes, so that we can also leave some time for Sam to do his live demo from his studio. So our first question starts with a compliment, and that's the best kind of question to get. So our question is, I love Sam's work, especially his mixed media work. could I ask how he approaches such pieces from an artistic and technical perspective, especially with the different physical and expansive qualities of materials, as well as any changes in the usual process when adding unconventional materials?
Huh. Yeah. So that is, I mean, it is a good question because it started with the compliment, so thank you for that. But yeah, I think that one thing with glass is that it has the ability to like work well with a lot of other materials. You know, so I think I kind of like just have that going for me as a glass maker. It also has the ability to like emulate a lot of other materials. So like, for example, like these pieces that I have right here that I made for the Crucible Soiree auction. I don't know if I guess it counts as mixed media, because so basically these were big bubbles of glass that were blown into a pile of soaked branches, like found branches. And so they really sort of captured that texture, and you can see all the little holes that they poked. And so, you know, working with that and just seeing how the glass like behaves with different materials is really inspiring. You know, like the oyster platters too, you know, just the way that it really, it like wants to emulate other things and wants to interact with things when you like push them together, and you just kind of never know how things are going to end up. And like a lot of times, you know, you make something and like it doesn't work out, and luckily with glass you can just throw it back in the furnace and make something else out of it. You know, so yeah, I definitely just try to experiment as much as I can. And yeah.
Another question from our listeners. When you glass blow, are you ever able to make it up or figure it out as you go? Or do you always have to make a full plan first before you start?
That is another good question. Most of the time, we have an idea of what we're making from the start. And I mean, especially just like trying to make a career out of it. It's like you're like, most of my work is on commission. So it's like I'll have, you know, had a design meeting and come up with like all these specifications for what it is we're going to make. And then, you know, like before we even start, like I'll set all my calipers to the right length and make sure, you know, that the pieces I'm making are actually the right size and shape and all that. So most of the time we're pretty much set on what we're gonna make. And even if you're feeling a little more freeform, it's like you pretty much have to have at least a general idea, because like we have a whole variety of like blowpipes that we use, like some that are really small, some that are big. So we'll often, you know, so we'll have to like really set all that up and like heat up the right size blowpipe for making the right size pieces and all that. But then again, like I do try to you know, make some space for that experimentation in my work. It's often at the end of the day or something, if we like got the order done and we still have a little bit of time to kill, then we'll start playing around, or it'll be like, you know, some wacky idea that I had, and I'll try it out and see if it works, and then it usually just kind of like snowballs into, you know, trying something else and then seeing how that works. But yeah, every once in a while I will just kind of like, all right, I'll just take a gather and like see what happens, and then, you know, see where it goes. And that can be really fun. But glass is such a demanding medium that it does help to have a plan often.
I'm going to do one more of our audience questions, and then I'd love to shift over to our live demo, and then maybe we can round back to wrap up our talk today. We have a request for you to comment on the statement on your website. We believe that modern manufacturing and consumption is broken, and in our own little way, we are working to change that.
Oh boy. Yeah, well, I guess I first wrote that when I made my website in like 2014. So, but yeah, I think it still holds true. I might have, you know, been a little hyperbolic, but Yeah, I think that, you know, when I guess a big inspiration for me is sort of working to combat, which is not the right word, but in my own little way, like this sort of disposable culture that we've grown very used to. And you know, we're sort of we're taught and we're used to just like, you know, getting these like single-use plastics all the time and then just throwing them away and not thinking twice about it, you know. And so in my mind, like making something that is really like thoughtfully produced, and like a lot of my work is made with recycled glass too. And I do, you know, I've been working on like technology to make my furnaces more efficient. And so, you know, when you're making something that's really thoughtfully made, you know, and sort of has that character, you know, in my own little way, like I'm hoping that that is kind of inspiring people to move away from a disposable culture.
Thank you for sharing that. We are so excited because you are welcoming us into your studio with a small glass demo today. And I believe you have your own special guest to introduce so that we can make our way over to your studio.
I do. So, okay, so we're in my showroom right now. So, pardon me. I'm going to flip the camera around. Or actually, I'll keep it landscape. Sorry about that. I'm going to flip the camera around, hopefully. All right, so yeah, here's my showroom real quick. All my piles of glass. We're gonna step outside and head into the shop part. This is a mural that the guy from Palette, my client, just dropped off this morning that I made, and I now have to find a place to put it up in my studio. But I made all the bottles, and then a friend of mine, Josh Powell, painted them all. So now we are heading into the shop. All right, and here is my girlfriend Muriel, who here she's been watching from the other room, but she's gonna take control of the camera so that I can show you guys a little bit about how the process works. So welcome to the studio. This is the furnace. So there's a big pot of molten glass inside of there, and I'm gonna pull some out and show you how the process works. Just need my glasses.
Safety first. We appreciate that.
All right. So this is my little Martha Stewart moment. I made this earlier, and so this is a little color start. So this is a little bit of clear glass with colored glass on the end of it, densely colored glass. So this is how we get color into most of our pieces. Giving it a little bit of heat to warm it back up. It's been sitting in what we call the garage over here, where we park glass. It's at about 1,000 degrees where glass is stable. And starting to heat back up, you can see a little bit of heat in it. And now I'm going to gather clear glass over it. There we go. So here's what we're going to be making. It's a cup that looks like this. And then all the texture comes from manipulating the surface of the glass. So I have these big tweezers here that I'm going to pinch the surface. And everywhere that I pinch it, it's creating these little lines, and it's also chilling the glass there. So now I'm going to pull out a little bit, and then I'm going to blow to add some heat or some air. Now it's expanded a bit. Stretch it out, the hair. And blow. And so it's already, you know, just in that short time, it's set up to be like rock hard. So I'm gonna reheat it quickly.
We're getting a lot of compliments for Muriel's cinematography as well, so good job, Muriel.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
So Sam, I believe the term for what you're doing right now is a flash. Is that right? You're doing a flash of heat to get it molten again?
So this is, a flash is kind of a technical term for just a short heat that doesn't actually heat the glass back up too much. It just stabilizes it. Right now I'm doing what we would call a full heat. So I'm getting it really moving again. Like you can see, if I stop turning, it's falling. So this is why I'm always turning the pipe to keep it on center. So I'm building that heat in. And here comes the fun part. Going to spin it around. And stretch it out. So like normally I'd be having an assistant blowing as I'm shaping so that I can be tooling as it's inflating, but you know, like I said, just doing this by myself. So these are some of the little things that we do when you're working by yourself.
And you're doing amazing multitasking all these pieces.
So now I'm just heating up the bottom half. I'm going to stretch it out again. Blow. And then start to flatten the bottom. So this is a fruit wood paddle, dense wood. Some paddling that. Got that there. And then I made this little constriction here. And that's where it's going to break off the pipe right there in just a moment. So now I'm going to take this other just solid rod with a little bit of glass on the end and heat this up. And so now I'm going to take a flash because I'm done shaping it. I just want to stabilize the heat. I don't want to get it hot enough to manipulate it and move it at all. I just want it to stay stable because if the glass gets too cold, it will crack. So we always have to keep it above about 1,000 degrees.
For the color of the glass, are you using frit or cane to add color?
Are you using frit or cane to add color to that?
So this was a solid bar of color. So it was just a little chunk. Looked like this, very densely colored glass. And I just applied that at the end of the pipe. All right, here's the juggling part. So this is warmed back up. Gonna come over here. And then you're gonna come around this side. I'm gonna take this, attach it to the bottom. And this is just warm enough that it's gonna stick and create a kind of a temporary fuse to the bottom of the cup. And then just the cold steel and a little bit of pressure right on that constriction and a tap, and it breaks off. And then we have an opening at the top of the cup.
It's amazing to watch you move so fast to make a glass because I don't think that I would be able to do this in a full day.
Compliments.
So now we're done with the bottom half of the cup. It's just the top half. That's not a very good lip to drink out of. So we're just focusing the heat in the top half by using the door of the furnace to kind of just focus that heat.
Is there a science to knowing how long to keep something heating? Like, is it a certain amount of time, or are you looking for a color?
How do you know how long to reheat something?
So I'm watching the very edge, and as it gets hotter, it starts to soften around the edge, and it actually starts to move a little bit. So I'm looking for that little bit of movement. And then also, before I take it back to the bench, I'll take it out and see. So now, hopefully you can see it. There's a bit of a red-orange glow on the lip there. So you can see it's starting to build heat, but needs a little bit more. It's kind of the thing you just develop a feel for it after doing it thousands of times.
About how many glasses could you make in a day using this process by yourself?
How many glasses can you make in a day like this by yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't been as productive as I am used to, so that's been a little frustrating. I've been making about 20 cups a day like this. Is probably about normal these days. Normally, with even just one assistant, it would probably be like 40, like 40 a day. So pretty much double with an extra person.
Wow.
All right, so I think we've got enough heat. It's moving a little bit. Again, I have to stabilize the bottom, so a little extra heat on the bottom. Then I'm going to come to the bench and use these ancient looking tools to flare that lip open and spread it out. Then I can go on the outside just to change the profile a little bit, back on the inside, and then you can see it's already rock hard. It's all set up. So that's how much time you get with one heat. And then if you want to do anything else, you got to take it back for another heat. So now the cup's done. I would normally give it an extra flash, just kind of an overall heat to stabilize it. Now I put a little bit of water on these tweezers. I'm going to apply it to that connection and then take it over to my little station here, and then a tap with that breaks that connection, and I can use a torch to fire polish it. And that melts the sharp edge where it broke. And then I have my fancy Kevlar salad tongs to pick it up, and there we go. It's a cup. And so I'm going to load it in here. And then it'll get cooled down over about a 12-hour process to stabilize the glass. If it cools too quickly, it'll crack and explode. So we don't want that. So we cool it down really slowly overnight, and then by the morning, you can drink out of it.
That was so cool. And I know it is a warm day. It seems like it's the warmest day we've had in a while. How hot is it in the studio for you right now?
Oh, hot. Here, I'm going to turn the camera back around. All right, so it's pretty hot. Standing right here, this close to the furnace, which I am pretty much all the time. I mean, I'm getting blasted with heat from here, and then it's also a pretty warm day out, so getting it coming in. But my studio is pretty close to the water, so we get a nice bay breeze through here. But it's basically by the middle of the first piece, I will have broken a sweat, and then I will just stay sweating all day long until the end. And then sometimes I'll just like take the garden hose at the end of the day and hose off just to cool down a little bit. So it gets pretty toasty. We gotta drink a lot of water.
Your pores must be very clear.
And I've burned off almost all of my arm hair too. So
Smooth, love it. Sam, we are so grateful for you joining us today and getting to watch that incredible and fast glassblowing demo of a pinch cup, little pinch side cup. We are so grateful that you shared your space and your time with us this afternoon. I want to give a real warm thanks to Sam. If you would like to give a little shout out to Sam, you're welcome to do that in the chat box. We know he's seeing it, and we'll make sure that he gets your messages after as well. I'm going to start wrapping up our talk, but you're welcome to stick around and get to chat for a bit as we start to close. I won't kick you out too quickly. We are very grateful that you've joined our virtual artist talk with the Crucible and Sam Schumacher of Rocket Glassworks. You can find Sam on Instagram at Rocket Glassworks. He can also be found online at his website, rocketglassworks.com. He's got incredible pieces for sale there, and you can follow him and find out about all the amazing work that he does with glass and mixed media all across the Bay Area. You can also check out the Crucible, where you can learn more about what we do throughout the community with students and adults and youth students as well. We have our match campaign that's happening right now all the way through May 8th. Every dollar that's donated is doubled up to $50,000. So visit thecrucible.org and help us support our artists, staff, and faculty through this challenging time so that we can be back open and ready to welcome you through the Crucible's doors as quickly as possible. You can also help support us by buying a gift certificate or becoming a member. So all that information is at thecrucible.org. Definitely follow Sam on Instagram and check out his extraordinary work on his website, Rocket Glassworks. We hope that you'll join us for our next artist talk in a couple weeks. We'll be featuring Laura Hopwood, one of our fire performers at the Crucible. A lot of people think of fire performance when they think of the Crucible, so join us as we sit down with Laura Hopwood, fire dancer extraordinaire, as she talks about her work and experience as a fire dancer in the Bay Area and teacher at the Crucible. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll keep our little Zoom meeting chat open for a little bit if you'd like to keep chatting over in the chat box. If you've got any last questions for Sam, please pop them in there. I'm happy to ask them as we start to wrap up. And otherwise, we wish you a very wonderful, safe day in the Bay and across the nation. And we hope that we'll see you very soon for another virtual artist talk with the Crucible. Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yay. Sam, you've probably been seeing all these wonderful positive comments over in the chat box.
Yeah, I've been seeing a handful of them. It's fun. It's like having all you guys here in the studio with me.
I know, right? It's nice to have visitors every once in a while.
Going a little crazy without them.
How is it over there in the studio? Are you seeing other people in their studios as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple across the way. You know, it's mostly folks that work by themselves anyway. So, you know, there's some, and we can say hi from across the parking lot. You know, but everyone's kind of in their own world for the most part. Yeah, and you know, again, and most people are shut down. Really, I mean, it's pretty quiet around here.
And your studio's in Oakland, correct?
It's in Berkeley, actually, West Berkeley.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
We did have a question a little bit earlier about materials to see, like, if you've ever encountered a material that doesn't mesh well with the glass, like if you found something and you think, oh, this will be really neat and we'll try this, and then it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, I've had all kinds of things that didn't work. So I've definitely done some experiments with like steel cage blowing. So basically like blowing glass into steel cages. And there's a bit of a learning curve there. If you heat it up too much, then the glass will actually stick to it. And steel and glass are not compatible, so it will break the glass. Copper, on the other hand, is compatible. So you can actually fuse copper into glass. They have the same coefficient of expansion. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know I have stuck a lot of pieces of glass to steel and had them blow up and break. So it's definitely happened. There is one piece I have right here that was successful. This is for a residential lighting project I'm working on with blacksmith Sean Lavelle in Oakland. She's doing all the metal work, and then I'm blowing glass into the cages. And her work is amazing. So that's really cool. This was just a really early prototype. Most of them are going to be rather large and have a lot of like ornamental ironwork attached to them. They're sort of like a sort of Spanish revival style. Yeah, and so then we did some experimentation to get the color right so that it really kind of goes well with the raw steel there. So yeah, this is an exciting project coming up that hopefully I'll still be able to do. Some of the larger pieces I'm definitely not going to be able to do by myself. So those will have to wait. The small ones I can do, but the large ones are, I mean, they're probably like 2.5 feet tall. So that's like probably about 14 or 15 pounds of glass, which doesn't sound like a lot until you're realizing that it's like molten and on the end of this long stick that you're trying to like counterbalance. So those will have to wait, unfortunately, but hopefully I can do the smaller ones by myself in the meantime.
What have been some of the challenges and positives of running your own studio, running your own operation?
Yeah, I mean, it's really freeing in a way because I do get to, allow myself more time for experimentation and just, working on whatever I want to work on. Normally like you'll be renting from somewhere and, you're like literally like paying by the hour. And so there's kind of this like stress, this like baseline stress level where you're like, oh, I need to be like producing things that I'm making money on so that I can pay for my like rental for the day, whereas having my own studio, it's definitely a lot more responsibility and a lot more work of just like making sure all the bills are paid and that, things are all that sort of like baseline business stuff is all happening. But, since I kind of have my baseline like work that I'm doing that pays the bills, then when I have a little bit of extra free time, it's really like liberating to be able to just get in the studio and experiment and work on new stuff without sort of that stress. Like I can know like, okay, yeah, my bills are paid, it's all going to be okay. And now I can just like work on like developing like something new, like, like this quarantine collection that I've come up with, that like I'm not getting, it's like I'm trying to sell it as a retail piece as opposed to like a commission where it's like, oh, I'm getting paid in advance. But I posted these on my website this morning and I already sold one. So that's actually this one in particular already sold.
Congratulations.
So that's exciting. But I can make more. So if anyone else wants them, feel free to order them up and I'll be making more.